Hey everybody, Casey here. So today we have part 3 of my conversation with Indra Nooyi. The whole thing ran during the Western Michigan University Food Marketing Conference last week. Today we focus on some of the things she wrote about in her book, My Life in Full, Work, Family, and Our Future. And one of the questions I ask her is, I say, listen, in your book, you write about some of the obstacles you faced as a woman in the workforce, but you also write about some of the obstacles you face as a person of color in the workforce. I had to ask a question that I simply did not know the answer to. Which was harder, being a woman or being a person of color? That's just one of the questions we talk about today in my conversation with Indra Nooyi. Enjoy. One of the things that I want to circle back on something we were talking about a few minutes ago. When you were at Pepsi, your signature program was sort of performance with purpose, trying to kind of expand the notion of what strong performance is within the company. What has to happen for more companies to sort of make that approach sort of a bedrock cultural foundation going forward? Because it's fine if one company does it or 10 companies do it, but unless you have an enormous number of companies do it, we're never going to achieve the moonshot that you're talking about, where you can only go so far in terms of the national interest.
Every company should sit down and say, how do I future-proof my company, or look at another way, de-risk the company?
Talk about that, because I know that's something the whole notion of you didn't do it just to be a great person. You did it because you saw there were some really bottom line things that you thought Pepsi needed to do going forward.
And, basically we started off saying, hey, PepsiCo is a good company. We want to be the good company. But nobody says somebody's a good guy or a good company because they're good looking or they have a lot of money. They say it's a good company because you're good commercially and you're good ethically. So I sat back and said, if we're going to be the good company that's good commercially, we have to deliver great performance, but we have to sustain this performance into the future. So let's look at the big mega trends that are likely to impact CPG and food and beverage, and therefore PepsiCo. And then let's think about what do we need to do today to remain successful in light of all of those mega trends, or in many cases, headwinds. And how do we make sure we don't add costs to the company if we ignore these mega trends? So our goal was to future-proof the company. That's really what it was. And future-proofing required that we cater to the health and wellness trend that was so rampant at that time, that we worry about our environmental footprint, because many, many societies were shutting us down for water usage or saying, hey, you guys are generating too much plastic. So we had to worry about not adding cost to our business, because we had to pay for water or pay a plastic tax. And you know very well that CPG was not the most attractive destination for many young people at that time. They wanted to go into tech or the financial industry or consulting. We had to give them a reason to come to CPG. And the reason was there's a deep sense of purpose in this company, in these companies, and we want to make society a better place. So come to work for us. So the performance with purpose was just an articulation of their strategy resulting from megatrends. Great performance, that's where we started. Human sustainability to transform the portfolio. Fun for you, better for you, good for you. We're not walking away from anything we're doing. We're just having a richer portfolio. Environmental sustainability and talent sustainability. So the focus was on future-proofing the portfolio, not ESG, not corporate social responsibility, none of that stuff. Now, in retrospect, what we were doing was a precursor to ESG, but our performance with purpose was linked to shareholder value. And I'd say this today for those people looking at ESG, make sure that every ESG metric is done with a view to creating value, because you're de-risking your portfolio. If you didn't execute on an ESG metric, your company will incur costs. And by de-risking the portfolio, you're creating shareholder value.
You talk about shareholder value, but there's also stakeholder value. Right? I mean, that's become a much more, not everywhere and not at all companies, but that has become much more important within a lot of organizations.
But to me, I'm saying go a step further. Stakeholder value has to translate to shareholder value. Okay. And the criticism we're having now, many companies have now, is because people think we are walking away from shareholder value and focusing on stakeholder value. All that I'm saying is stakeholder value is an interim step to shareholder value.
I would imagine you see it as a positive thing that within a lot of companies, a lot of this movement in all these directions is actually kind of coming up from the bottom. That employees are saying to the people in the C-suite, hey, we think you need to make these moves. You need to take political positions, social positions, cultural positions, whatever it happens to be, and they're pushing companies forward.
Well, I think many people, society as a whole, is saying, we don't have political leaders who have the will to do anything. So maybe we put pressure on corporate leaders. And many times put corporate leaders in very difficult positions, because corporate leaders cannot take positions on everything. They have a company to run. Yet they're being forced to take positions. And also, it's very hard to move a business model from right to left very fast. You've got a big business footprint. If you have to change your position abruptly, it costs a lot of money. And then how do you go back to a different position? So in a world where people don't yet have comfort with our political leaders, people tend to turn to the business leaders. And that's a tough position for business leaders to be in. Typically, what we did in my time, what I did, is I looked at our value statement and said, do I need to take a position on something because it's consistent with our value statement? And if it's not, I'm not going to wade into it.
It's an entirely different conversation we can have another day, but we're seeing that happen also even with what's happening in Russia right now.
You bet.
Companies that were heavily invested in Russia are having to totally rejigger their business models because of what's going on over there. But as I said, that's a different conversation. One question I did want to ask you, and this was actually asked by Lily Zwanka, who introduced us today. Her question was, so if I look at Indra Nooyi's career and say, that's the one I want to have, is A, that a productive way to look at it? And B, how would she do that? Would you recommend approaching a career that way? Just sort of looking at your career and say, that's what I want to do.
Don't do that. Oh God, because if you did that, you'd be so fixated on becoming CEO, you'll forget what you have to do. Every time I would say, focus on the job you've got and do it better than anybody else. Redefine your job to be bigger than it is and add value in profound ways so that people say, Lily is not just a product manager for this product. She is a general manager of this business. She thinks about her job very differently. She adds value in creative ways. She has such a breadth of knowledge. Let's get Lily in. People have got to know what your hip pocket skill is and what you do well. And you have to define that for everybody by the way you act, the way you deliver product. If you focus on the job you've got, people will push you along. If you start off saying in 3 years, I've got to be the head of the brand group, in 5 years, I've got to be the president of marketing, you will be so fixated by it, you will do a lousy job. So please tiptoe before you, decide that you have to run.
2 last questions real quick. Well, the first one is actually not so quick. The second one will be very quick.
Yeah.
Maybe not. That's going to depend on your answer.
Yeah.
So you write a lot in the book about being a woman in business. And then separately in the book, you write about being a person of color in the business world. I don't know how to ask the question, but I want to ask
it.
Which was harder? Which complicated your life more? And I'm asking this question, and you and I talked before we started to record this. You for a while rented a house in a town that I live in, and were basically told you really don't want to live here. And the message was you wouldn't be comfortable here, which really meant they weren't going to be comfortable with you living next door to them. So which is harder? And for people of color who are in the audience, what would you say to them about the world going forward?
I'd say on all dimensions, the world is improving in some ways and not yet improving in some ways. But I would say being a woman is hard because we're held to a different standard. When you add the color dimension, it's much harder still because the color barrier still exists, Kevin. And that's unfortunate, but There are those very progressive companies who basically say, I want the best talent. I don't care what gender or color or background or ethnicity you are. Then there are those that are uncomfortable dealing with women, but much, much more uncomfortable in dealing with people of color. I think it's my generation that has those biases. As the younger generation comes up, I'm actually very optimistic because they are more inclusive. They deal with each other as equals. So my sincere hope is, as the Gen Ys, the millennials all rise, we will see a different world. And as the boomer generation, we retire, hopefully we'll see a different world.
I agree with you. I think our children and grandchildren are going to look back at some of the stuff that happened to our generation and say, what were you thinking?
I know.
Okay, last question.
Yeah.
And I loved your book. You broke my heart in one little place. What is it about the New York Yankees that you love?
Everything. Yankee Stadium, pinstripes. I love every player. You know, to me, what's most profound? I was in a Yankee Stadium game when I saw somebody with a T-shirt, which listed every team and how many championships they'd won. And the total was, I think, 27. Then the New York Yankees, 27 championships. So I sat there and said, I want to support a winner. I love everything about that team. But, you know, if the Yankees alone have won more championships than most of the teams combined, that's my team. I've loved them from day one.
And when you came over from India and were going to Yale, that was basically your first professional sports team experience.
Totally. Remember that famous 1978 coming from behind, the one-game playoff against the Red Sox and beating the Dodgers in the World Series?
Yes.
That was, imagine being introduced to baseball that way. Oh my God, it was electric.
So you're happy that the there's been a labor settlement?
Oh, I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled. I can't wait for spring training. I can't wait for the season to start.
I lied. I have one more question for you.
Yeah.
So you're done being a CEO, but if they asked you to be commissioner of baseball?
No.
No.
I'm done being CEO. I want to be a spectator. I want to go watch the games. I mean, I don't go to too many games, but I watch it all on TV. I really want to enjoy the game.
Well, listen, I so appreciate all your time today. I think our audience, which is made up of executives and students, has learned an enormous amount. So once again, thank you for joining us at Western Michigan University. And hopefully down the road, when things have sort of simplified, we can get you into an audience and you can do a Q&A with the students, because I know they'd love to pick your brain.
Absolutely. Kevin, thank you for lovely questions. Really appreciate the creativity with which you ask the questions. Really.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.